feels more like spring today than a fall day. It's beautiful out there.
I agree. It was much nicer to walk out today, out the door, than in the 16 degrees that was out there the other day.
Well, Sonny, if you want to keep an eye on the waiting room, I'll go ahead and kick things off. I know we want to be sensitive to folks' time and their busy schedule. I see an awful lot of familiar faces and names on the participant list. So just wanted to say hello to those that I know and have worked with, and introduction to those that I have not. My name is Rob Evans, and I'm the School Safety Liaison Officer for the State's Agency of Education in the Department of Public Safety. And I'm joined by a colleague and good friend of mine, Sonny Erickson, who sits at Vermont Emergency Management and is the co-chair of the Vermont School Crisis Planning Team, and also is a partner with me at Vermont's School Safety Center. And our presenter today is, again, a good friend and colleague of mine from Vermont Emergency Management, our public information officer. And if there is an emergency that the state has gone through, or critical incident, Mark has helped the state and Vermont Emergency Management navigate that. And, as you see from, all the things that are happening nationally, communication, credible communication, informative communication is key to an effective response. And I see many of you, and we've talked with many of you, when you're managing a critical incident, the early and often methodology really does work, but there has to be a clarity with the information that we do put out. And I think we saw some of that in our most recent response to some of the swatting calls across the state, with different methodologies of communicating with their school and education community. Some worked well, others worked okay. And I think today is an opportunity to discuss, some of the key lessons learned from a variety of different critical incidents, and also to help you all manage a critical incident in the future. Just a couple of quick reminders. If you don't know of its existence, the Vermont School Safety Center does have a website. I would encourage all of you to, as you go through your planning and training and exercise initiatives throughout the academic year, I would ask that you point to that. And that website, there's just a tremendous amount of resources that are available there. And also, Sonny and I are available to you as well. If they are managing, or your colleagues are managing, a critical incident, and they just need to run something by, needs another set of eyes, have, a comment that they would like to make, Sonny and I are available pretty much on a 24-hour basis. Sonny will put our information in the chat, our cell phones and our emails. If there are things that you're trying to manage, again, I would say that you do that. I would also say that I never thought that we would be in this position, 20, 25 years ago, when I started my career with the state police, that education and our education leaders would be managing the variety of different types of critical incidents that unfortunately they are having to respond to now, from the awful things that you're seeing in the news to board conversations that get a little bit of toxic, to after school activities where we've got fights on basketball courts and student suicides and all of that. It really is impactful for you all. So I just want to acknowledge the work that you do, and also acknowledge that this is not easy stuff for you all to manage. And Sonny and I are keenly aware of the impacts that this stuff has on you. And I would just say that we're here to help as best we can. So this training is designed to kind of be a teaser. It's only as good as the participation that Mark gets throughout these 2 hours. Sonny will send out an email after the 2 hours that just kind of outlines the training that you're going through. So if you need to add that to your professional development credit, you can certainly do that. And then there'll be a short survey that Sonny will send out as well, just getting your feedback about the training, and also if there are some things that you would like to see offered in the future, or resources that you would like to see that currently aren't available on the School Safety Center website, then I would say, let us know that as well. Sonny and I are going to bounce off and on the training this morning as she puts in the information or contact information. If there are things that you're cloudy or unclear about after the training, then certainly reach out to us. But I'm sure Mark will knock it out of the park for you. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mark and Sonny, and folks have a great training. Thanks, Mark, for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Always appreciate your insight and teeing it up for us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mark Bosma. I am the Public Information Officer at Vermont Emergency Management. As Rob said, I've been here almost 20 years. It hardly seems that long, but and before that, I was a reporter at Channel 3 for 10 years, from 94 to 2004. And so I have a little insight. Things have changed a lot in the media since I was there. So I have a little insight into, based on my experience there and my experience here. So let's start out with a video. I think I finally figured out how to get these to work. And tell me if you can't see or hear.
I just want to reassure parents that we're doing everything we possibly can.
South Burlington School District and police continue their investigation into who made threats to teachers and the high school this week.
It's clearly a cybercrime because it was done through email and the internet. I can't go into any specifics, of course, because it's too early in the investigation. We have a lot of work to do.
Both Detective Ron Bliss and Superintendent David Young say these threats are taken seriously, but believe the risk was low and that it could be similar to the hoax made against Essex High School last week. Communication was the main concern many parents brought up at Wednesday's school board meeting.
Parents like, oh, okay, there's something happening. I'm going to get my children. There were no guidelines. There were no plan for doing that.
I know communications is always hard, but my first obligation is to ensure the safety for children.
Some parents say they never received the email warning. Superintendent Young says there was a tech glitch for the email list. It's been fixed. These last 2 stressful days have shown him the security protocols the district uses do work.
Say that we're well rehearsed or we're ready for these situations. We do our very best to have protocol and procedure, but we don't really enjoy having to practice these real life.
Now, students and staff will be back at school tomorrow with another day of increased police presence, just to be safe. Live in the news.
Okay. Let me get to the PowerPoint now. Okay, Sonny, can everyone see that? Or can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, is it a full screen PowerPoint?
Full screen. Looks great.
Okay, great. I'm so proud of myself. A couple of things about that video. First, not a knock on South Burlington at all. They have for a long time had great plans, great communication. You heard in the story that there was a glitch on the listserv. That's why some parents didn't get it. But I hope that illustrates what can happen if you don't have communication with parents. You don't want to be the one sitting in front of that school board meeting while people are talking about how they had no idea how their children were being cared for or if there was a plan. But we'll talk about how to avoid that. You're never going to avoid it altogether, but we'll try to give you some tools. So one preface to this is guidance to help you make decisions. It's not necessarily going to be 100% perfect for you. Best practices aren't always practices that work best. One size doesn't fit all. This is a framework and you can work within it or use it to inform some better ways of doing things for you. So, but the most important thing here is never stop releasing information, especially during an incident. Make sure you're communicative with parents and kids and staff, because I'll outline why that's important, and it's pretty self-explanatory otherwise. So why do we communicate? We're trying to ensure the safety of, in your world, students, staff, the public. We're trying to assist emergency response by providing information that helps the public make good decisions. When there is an emergency response, it's not a good thing to have a lot of people showing up without a specific place to go. They can kind of get in the way. And so informing people will help emergency responders in that way. And probably the second most important after the safety is you're maintaining the public's confidence in you, the school, to communicate with them, and your ability to manage an incident and keep kids safe. And then when there is an incident, if you're communicative before, they'll be more likely to listen to your guidance and just trust you. Like I said, an informed public makes sound decisions, and this helps ensure the best possible response that benefits students and staff. You don't want to divert, police to crowd control when they could be better used somewhere else. Rumors on social media or in the press can lead to poor decisions by the public, create a lot of anxiety, and so we're going to get into a lot of social media practices and the best way of handling that. Now, before you do anything else, if you haven't already, make sure there's someone on staff who can serve as a communications coordinator. This isn't the person who's going to be the spokesperson. This may not even be the person who sends out press releases. It's just someone who pulls it all together and can be a point of contact for the press, a point of contact that the press gets to know. And so they're not answering questions, they're taking messages and arranging for someone to get back to them, or maybe they have a script next to them that they can read to the press when they call and say, that's all we have. All right, so at the top, you're going to see a react button. So just a show of thumbs or laughs or whatever is on there. How many of you have someone who is designated as the specific media person or someone for outreach? I'll give you a second to find the button. All right, so quite a few, and that's great. That's a good first step, and I'm happy to see most of you are doing that. And as you know from your days as educators, you know that we learn best when we learn from each, well, maybe not in high school, but at this level, we learn best when we learn from each other. So I'm going to throw out a couple of questions here and there. We're going to do more of those polls. But does anyone want to offer up how they would communicate during an incident? What they do if they have, it's usually I know there are a myriad of incidents, but does someone want to offer up how they do things? All right, and that's fine. That's what you're here to learn to do. So I understand if you have other work to do right now, or if you just don't. And we're going to get into this a little more, but other agencies should be involved in your communications. Okay, so like with everything else. Okay, Sandy, thank you. You use on-call to communicate with parents. I'm in the CVU school district. I've had 3 kids go through. Well, one is still in it, and we get phone calls all the time from our superintendent or principal, and I'm sure a lot of you have that, most likely for snow days. Okay, so have a plan ahead of time. It's like a lesson plan, only this is communications plan. It provides guidance for communication. It makes sure that whenever there's an incident, whoever is there, they're doing the same thing and they can lead it in a consistent manner. And it can be simple. It can just be this person is answering the phone. This person is monitoring social media. Hopefully a little more than that, a little guidance on how that works. Maybe not just a list of people, but it in a worst case scenario, that any plan is better than no plan. So before you make your plan, review any school plans and make sure that it's consistent with what's going to be happening during an incident. Identify partners in local emergency response. And I'm going to bring this up in different contexts throughout this presentation, but local or state police may be better suited to perform PIO duties. So make contacts now and come to an understanding of who is going to be doing what, because you don't want conflicting information. But regardless of who is releasing, public information officer. I tell people later not to speak in acronyms, and I fall into it myself because I've been a PIO for 20 years, and I assume everyone in the world knows my title. So, but that may or may not be true. But public information officer is the person who is, there's communications coordinators who do a little less their planning, but public information officer, for Vermont Emergency Management and the state, during an incident, I write press releases. I'm in charge of assigning people different jobs, writing press releases, doing graphics, social media, that sort of thing. So thank you for pointing that out, Eric. And regardless of who is lead communicator, the school still needs to communicate to parents and the press if asked if it's an appropriate thing to do. You don't want to go silent, even if someone else is communicating. Develop messages ahead of time. You pretty much know, you're not going to know every specific scenario, but generally you know that other schools have had kids show up with a pocket knife, or a gun in the car, or just there's been a disturbance of some sort with a parent showing up. There are a few scenarios that you can anticipate, so you can figure out how you're going to address those, figure out who are most affected, and that's students and staff and yourselves, and what actions your audience could take to help things. And in your if you do educational blasts to parents, educate them on what would cause, and figure out how to get them to learn more about what you're doing and how they factor into that and help the kids. Develop and pre-test your messages, whether it's press releases, which we'll delve into a little bit later, or messages to the public, your direct emails, or however you do things. Develop them ahead of time and provide supporting points, so you're not just declaring something, you're proving it. Be clear on recommended actions, be direct, concise, and test the messages with colleagues, friends, and family, probably all three, because you want to make sure it's factually accurate and that people can understand it. This is educating people. I'll get into that more later. I have a lot of stuff later, trust me. But education ahead of time helps a lot during an incident. Develop an action plan. This is where you identify people who are going to serve different functions in either a 1-hour event, an event that is minor, or a protracted event, and figure out what could get things off track. Do you have a backup to internet? Some areas that's a possibility, other areas it's not. So have a contingency plan for whatever your plan states. And cheat. If you're developing a plan, many schools have them. talk to your neighbors, talk to people you see at conferences. If anyone here has one, put it in the chat, and it's a good way to see what others are doing. Again, you can change it, obviously, to fit your needs, or if you don't like it, you can take the bits you like and add what you do like. And the Vermont School Safety Center has templates for a lot of things, like a lot of templates for different things, and that's the website URL there, as if you don't all know it already. Okay, so communication, that's what we're talking about here. That's everything. That slide was probably superfluous, but is there a central point of contact at your school? Show of thumbs. How many people do have, I mean, and I'm someone who's been established for this purpose, not, they call the superintendent's office or the principal, because during an incident, that's not practical. Show of thumbs or hands, who has someone who is the media contact? Great. Awesome. And does anyone want to offer up who that is? It doesn't have to be a name. I'd rather it not be a name, but what position? Communications director, Amy Miner said. Does anyone have a general staff member? Sandy, is your hand up to speak, or is that just a show? Okay. And if anyone just wants to jump in, that's fine. The superintendent. Well, change that. Because honestly, during an incident, the superintendent is going to be very busy, and you don't want that person to be bogged down with other things, because you do want to communicate. And there's probably going to be a primary contact for the incident, and that's going to be law enforcement or fire. Again, make the connection with your local fire and law enforcement agency to see how they're going to be communicating, because you need to build yourself in, or at least operate on a parallel track, because the school always wants to communicate what they're doing. You can reiterate what's happening with the response if it's already been released, but that stuff needs to be coordinated. And once heard, you don't want to be exchanging business cards at an incident. So reach out today. I just mentioned this. All messaging from schools and responders must be coordinated. The big drawback, the big danger of not being coordinated, if you're saying one thing and the police are saying another, not only does that create confusion, but you lose trust of the public. In fact, both of you may, in which case that is not going to help your response at all. So make sure everything is coordinated so that you don't shake the public's confidence in your ability to handle the situation or that of the police and fire department. Good communication maintains calm. There are going to be rumors and misinformation out there that can lead to panic and poor decision making. And if you're not communicating, that's going to be truth to a lot of people. The rumors are going to be truth to a lot of people. And you and your responders are the most accurate sources of information. You know exactly what's going on. You're not getting a text, there may be parents outside of school, or I got a text from my child who said that they heard loud bangs in the hallway. Well, that could be anything, but that could also be construed as something very nefarious and scary. So stay on top of communications. When you do communicate, include as much detail as possible on the nature of the threat and the response. I should say, usually this will help minimize the panic. As you heard in that story, they referenced Essex and South Burlington. This was clip was from about 5 years ago. Essex had a large response to a baseless threat, as it turned out. So it helps minimize panic and poor decision making, and it lets parents know that their kids are being cared for when they know what you're doing to take care of them. And again, you can mention the response of law enforcement and fire, but make sure that's coordinated so you're not saying too much, because there's a lot that, the superintendent may hear some things that aren't public. And so just make sure with the communicators from the local fire and police that you can say that. Keep it going. Keep the information going. Update everyone, the press, parents, kids, students, staff, even if there's no update. Do it at regular intervals if you can. Sandy, you want to jump in with a question? Sandy Alexander. You're muted. Okay, now you're not muted, but I can't hear you. Maybe you can drop it in the chat. But I'll keep going. So even if there's no update, you should be communicating on a regular basis. That way people aren't in the dark wondering when they're going to get another update, because we've all been in situations where, we're waiting for news, waiting to hear from a doctor, or a loved one is in surgery, and you're hoping to get information soon. And if you don't know when you're going to get it, it raises your anxiety. And of course, your mind goes to the worst case scenario. Well, some people do. Maybe you're a bit more positive than I am. And then determine if information needs to be shared. Be forthcoming, but determine if unimportant information causes panic. You don't want to say there's no shooter. Well, yes, you do. But I put this down. If there's no chance of a bomb. No, wait, this is a better example I thought of on the fly yesterday, which is when I do my best thinking. Whenever there's a fire call to, we had our smoke alarm go off at my house, and it was nothing, and the fire department showed up, but rescue also shows up. So there's an ambulance out front. If you have a fire alarm at school, chances are rescue is going to show up as well. Do you want to mention that rescue was there? Maybe, probably. I don't know. It depends on the situation, but at least explain why they were there, that it was just a matter of course, and there were no injuries. So that's a very loose statement, and it's very incident specific. So just think about causing panic while being totally forthcoming. Instead of the bomb squad, you should say all aspects of law enforcement were there, or something like that. Okay, so our main enemy is misinformation. They gain momentum and credibility if you're not communicating. I've heard that social media, sometimes things aren't exactly accurate on social media. I think I've seen it once or twice. Kids are texting from the classroom. People are hearing things, and then they're passing it on to someone at the post office, or they're calling a friend. And the press will always do this, not in a nefarious way. They're not just making things up. For the most part, I don't know everybody, but for the most part, they're not just making things up. If they don't have information from you, it's not like if there are police cars outside of the school, it's not like they're not going to report it. They're going to report it, and they're going to go to neighbors. They're going to go to people standing outside, and you could have someone standing outside who doesn't know that there's a tech center there, and say, oh, I heard a bunch of banging, like 10 minutes before the police got here, or I heard a lot of loud bangs, and then that makes it on the news, and then the reporter comes back on and says, well, we have no word on what's going on. Just communicate as early as you can so you don't have that. So, critical information that you need to address. And my apologies right now for being so wordy. That's why I'm always hopeful that people will chime in, because online it's not easy to be as interactive, and also my lack of technological expertise kind of prohibits me from doing other little things that I normally do. Like, I showed a video at the beginning, but it's a little more complicated for me, at least, during the presentation. So there's that. Okay, so critical information. What's the nature of the threat? As much information as is known or legally possible to share. There are some things that you can't mention. I mean, you have laws around talking about minors, and there may be an injury and some sort of HIPAA regulation or a police investigation, but you need to work with law enforcement to determine how to honestly express the threat in a way that informs parents and, if possible, does not add to anxiety. Not knowing, like I said, will bring many people to the worst case scenario. And I have to admit, I know better, but if I heard something was going on at my local school and I wasn't hearing anything, and I kept seeing rumors on social media, I would at least want to go, pick up my kid. I really don't think I would, because I do know better, but I can completely see why people would start showing up at school. And that could be detrimental to any response that you have going on. What is the response? How it's protecting kids? Who's there? Tell people ahead of time how a response works, or what the different levels are of response within the school. Now, how many of you, thumbs up or hands or whatever, how many of you know the basics of emergency response? Like I mentioned earlier, that ambulances show up, and who's in charge, and mutual aid, and okay, a good number. If you don't know, it's emergency responders are always happy to educate. Ask the local fire chief, or if someone in the police department, they can certainly help with that, so you know what to expect, and you can tell others why certain things are happening, or how certain things would happen ahead of time. And if you write something up, run it by fire or rescue or police, just to make sure you have things right. What happens next in the response, and what parents should do, and why they're doing that? Like I said, parents want to do something. My kid's in danger, they have to trust you. And give parents something to do, so they're not, sitting there twiddling their thumbs, wondering what they can do. At the very least, send them to a website or a social media site and say, we are going to update the situation every half hour or 15 minutes or whatever's realistic. But it gives them something to go to get updates, and they're not left in the dark. And even if you don't have an update, reiterate what you've been saying and say, nothing new, but we're doing this. This is what happened. Just give parents something to do. And loop in the students. I'm sure you do, although certain situations you can't very well get on the loudspeaker and say out loud what's going on. Excuse me. Because kids, I don't know what the rules are at your school, but I know At my daughter's school, they can have their phones and they can text. They can, I'm not sure about social media. I'm not sure about that. It's never come up. But one thing that I am remembering from the Essex response, Essex was communicating. Things were going well, as well as they could be with the limited information they had. But they were telling parents and the press and everyone what they knew, and they were addressing the level of the threat. But on one of the local TV stations, they were live, and they had a parent on over the phone because, yeah, that's true, Becca. They will have their phones even if it's not allowed. The parent was on the air talking about what they knew about what was going on in the school based on texts from their kids. And this person, while speaking, got a text from their kid, and live on the air, she looked at it and she said, okay, the shooter is in the tech center. There was no shooter. There never was. There wasn't a threat for it. But that went out live on the air. So that's an example of where things can go really wrong. I don't remember it causing a huge panic. Maybe no one was watching the newscast. Maybe, I think more likely, Essex was doing a very good job of letting people know that, nothing had been found. There had been no injuries. But that can happen. So kids are talking, and kids don't always wait to get all the facts. This is an extreme example because it's not often that parents are live on the air when they get texts from their kids, but that's just another reason to communicate with everyone. Help everyone understand what's happening. And again, if it's possible and appropriate, but I know in certain incidents, you just can't do it. And ahead of time, help them understand the ramifications of spreading rumors. You don't really want to clamp down on them and say, don't ever text during an incident, because they're going to do it anyway. But make them know that, if you're spreading rumors, then that makes people panic a little bit, especially if you're sending it outside the building. Okay, so here's a scenario that has multiple pieces. There's a fire in your school's chemistry lab. It's minor, but the fire department responds. They have to bring hazmat because of the chemicals. No one's hurt, and then police, as they usually do, they discover rather quickly that the fire was intentionally set. Does anyone want to offer up either, unmute themselves or in the chat? What's your role in communications in this? What are you telling parents about this incident? Okay, I'll tell you. I don't know what your practice is. Okay, I have something from Amy. I approve the messaging that goes out and then hold a press conference if necessary. That's good. You're speaking on behalf of the school. You're clearing information with the fire department and the police. Well, mostly police because now it's a crime scene. But you're talking about you're talking about the incident with information that you have. Jennifer actually had a fire in a science lab. The fire department cleared the building and no one was hurt. That's awesome. But you're sending a note home to school to parents at the very least. You're probably not doing a press release because the fire department or police will be doing that. But you can send the press release home to parents. Or if you think it's not, if they're not, and if you think it's worth it, you're sending something out to the press. But you're talking about what the school's done. You're reiterating what police and fire have said. And so there are often multiple parts, and fire, hazmat, and the police are working together, and you need to get yourself into the mix with them. Okay, so news releases aren't as common as they once were. I generally have limited it to, maybe one a day during an incident, unless things are changing a lot. A lot of information is put up on social media, and the press just gets information from social media. That's just the way they work. At first, when we first started, and it was the Wild West, so to speak, I had a reporter from the Associated Press contact me and ask, he's like, okay, something you post to Facebook, is that like you talking to me as a reporter and I can report that directly? And I was like, absolutely. The Associated Press is very thorough, but you may have occasion to do this. Of course, you want accurate information, clear, concise, easy to understand, with simple sentences and short paragraphs. It's written in the third person, and if you use any facts that come from anyone else, attribute them to that entity, and clear it with that entity, because you want to both give them credit, and if they end up being wrong, you don't want people to think that you were wrong, and shake their confidence in you. And don't use jargon or acronyms. I was testing you at the beginning by using PIO, but none of us are perfect. When you're writing it, organize the facts ahead of time. Open with a very strong, with a strong lead that declares what is happening. You don't need to hide it. You don't need to start it with, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, or call me Ishmael, or when I was young, my father told me whatever. This is what's happening. And then you give more detail and supporting facts, and the inverted pyramid. When I was in college, I learned about this in a journalism class. It doesn't have to go all the way to the bottom with background. If it needs to be just 2 paragraphs, if you can convey what people need to know in 2 paragraphs, then that's great. Otherwise, if you need to write more, write more. If it can be less, then do less. That'll help you out a lot. Normally 1 page, a consistent header, and includes contact information where they can actually reach someone who can do something for them. And when I say them, I mean the press. This is a news release. Date and time. You don't want someone picking up a press release or opening their email tomorrow and seeing a press release without a date and time. I mean, sure, the email will have the date and time, so that makes things easier for us, but you can't count on everyone looking at when the email came in. Just like on social media, you can't count on people looking at when it was posted 2 days ago and know that it was posted 2 days ago. If you have a date and time, you may not need a news release number, but in an ongoing event, I generally do that. If you do go on to a second page, write more. This is for printed. This is more for printed. That's more for printed press releases. You don't fax things much anymore. In fact, I don't fax anything. And then at the end, you write "and" or 3 pounds or 30, just to let people know that that's it. And again, I won't tell your students that you're cheating, but write press releases and other written products now. You can anticipate certain information, like I said earlier. You know the scenarios that you may be faced with, and you can take one from a neighboring district or a neighboring school. When I started out, I took a lot of press releases from other states that did the same thing and just sort of built mine based on those. And just out of curiosity, does anyone have press release templates? Hit thumbs up again if you have a press release template. CVSD, I like that. That's where my kids are. All right, a few. So those are the people you should hit up for more information. You can also go to the School Safety Center website. I believe they're, I'm not sure if they're specifically press releases. I think so, but it's worth a look. So just, do it ahead of time and steal from others. Okay, I'm going to do these one at a time. Thumbs up if your school district or your school has a Facebook account. Okay, quite a few of you, if not all. How about Twitter? I'll never call it X. Twitter. No on Twitter. Okay, so and the last one, Instagram or something else. Okay, and I will. I'll give full credit to on yesterday's presentation. South Burlington made a great point that you have different audiences for each social media page. Instagram, they find that that's the best way to reach students. I think I would second that. I don't think it's cool anymore to be on Twitter, but who knows? Parents may learn things from Facebook or Twitter, so it's good to familiarize yourself with these things. Start pages, start getting a following. Mention it in communications to parents. I'm fully aware that many of you are in areas where cell service and even internet is a little weak or non-existent. So just it's something you have to work through. I don't have a solution to that. And be careful of unintended consequences. If you put something out there, I mean, a lot of people get burned especially if you're thinking of doing something funny or clever. It could really backfire. A good way to educate is to do something clever and different, and it catches people's attention, but make sure you run it by a lot of people to be sure that there's nothing that makes you look bad. Hopefully that makes sense. During an incident, and just on a day-to-day basis, but especially during an incident, assign someone to watch social media, because that's where most rumors come from the students, the public, the press, wherever. And it can be anyone, anyone you trust. They're just looking at it, looking for trends, looking for things that people are saying. And then they can go to someone within the school or the superintendent and say, hey, a lot of people are saying that they heard loud bangs in the school before the police showed up. Is that something we can dispel? And hopefully it's something that you can. And then you don't address every single one, or maybe you do. It depends on, a lot of this is incident specific and just your feeling of what's right. You don't want all of a sudden come out and say, there was no shooting in the school today. You can say something like, there was an incident at the school, and then just reiterate what the incident was. No one was hurt. Hopefully there was no threat to students. But just get that information out there so the rumors stop. You're never going to stop them all. Now the bottom line in this section, communicate. Determine the best means of communication for your area. A lot of you, it's going, when you don't have cell service or internet, it's going to be landline. We still get landline calls from CVU because they offer that as an option. CVU, Champlain Valley Union High School, for those of you who don't know. That's the best. I also get calls on my cell phone. We get emails every week, but determine the best means of communication for you and plan your communication strategy. Deputize a social media staff and stick to the game plan, but be flexible. This isn't going to work for every single person, and it's not going to be right in every scenario. You have to use your judgment and figure out what is the best way to communicate with people. And don't worry about formatting and language if you're writing something and distributing it, because in an emergency you want to get it out as quickly as you can. Okay. Now, something some of you have dealt with, some of you have not. The press. Okay, thumbs up if you have ever spoken with, TV or, mainstream newspaper, or had an interaction with the press or done an interview. Yeah, a lot of you. And that's because there are a lot of reporters out there now. There are local newspapers, there are the statewide newspapers, there are TV stations. They can do interviews with you. A lot of areas were underserved by Channel 3 when I was there because it was a long drive and we just couldn't get there in a day, and we had to determine if it was a big enough event to do it. Now they can just get you on Skype or Zoom or whatever they have, and you are being interviewed. And of course, cell phones have enabled anyone to become a reporter. We've all seen on the news viral video of something that shouldn't be happening, going up on social media and millions of people seeing it. So you can't count on someone taking a video to first wait for you to give them the context for what is happening. It's just going to go up raw, and people are going to jump to their own conclusions. And mainstream reporters can do the same thing. They will hopefully they will get the facts from you first, but they can broadcast from anywhere that they have cell service or Wi-Fi. They just go up on their phones and they can get live on the air if it's a big enough event. So that creates a lot of issues for us. And reporters, even I don't like using professional ones, the mainstream, people who are hired by Channel 3, Channel 5, 2244, the newspapers, even those folks, even if you're talking to one of them, it doesn't mean they'll do a thorough job. A lot of them, especially nowadays, are young and inexperienced right out of college, and they don't know what they don't know. They don't know why you're doing something. A lot of them don't even know the impact of reporting something that could cause a panic. Whether it's just not knowing or it's gung-ho, hey, this is news and I'm going to report it no matter what you do. And I'm not saying, again, it's not nefarious. They're not trying to get you or cause problems for you. They just don't know. So we have to educate reporters before and during an incident. Sometimes it's not possible, but they may come to school to do a story on one of your teachers. Make sure you're there and introduce yourself, whether it's the communications coordinator or the principal or the superintendent, whoever can be there, and just introduce yourselves and make sure they have contact information and say, call this person anytime something happens. And, we'd appreciate it if you gave us a chance. Just making yourself available to them will make it a lot better outcome. Coordination at the scene. The press is going to show up to certain situations, and you can probably anticipate which ones. Sometimes it's a surprise that they do, sometimes it's a surprise that they don't. And the bigger the event, the more media will be there. You probably don't want them walking into school. In some situations, you don't want them walking onto campus. So the police and fire will actually help keep people off school grounds. They will do a lot of crowd and media control, but you need to be part of that. And one way of helping keep them at bay is actually, being forthcoming, going to them, saying, this is what's happening. I'm sure police have told you that you can't come in because of the security threat. Kids are safe in their rooms. Just make sure you're communicating with them when they get there. Your communications coordinator, kind of be on the lookout. At emergency management, we are not on the scene of an incident. We are at the emergency operations center. So press usually just walks in and they check in at the switchboard, and I'll go down and talk to them. But make sure everyone has some sort of information so they're not reporting live from the scene that whatever is happening. They're going to want access to whoever that person is, the scene, newsmakers, someone to interview. They need you to explain the big picture, why the response is happening this way, why the school is doing certain things. Respect for deadlines. I put that in back before they had deadlines every minute of every day because they want to get it up there quickly. And even the TV stations, they start their newscasts at 4 o'clock now, and they local go until 7:30, and then they pick up again at 10 o'clock, and they go to 11:30. And so it's all over the place. There's noon news, there's morning news, but as quickly as you can to help them help you, the better. And provide updates as quickly as possible, because especially if things are getting better and you can calm people down, get it to the press as quickly as you can. And figure out ahead of time where you would set up the press if there was a large event that was long term. And I don't even know who has big satellite trucks anymore. I haven't seen one in a while, but you could have satellite trucks or microwave trucks show up. That's how, at least when I was there, that's how they broadcast live from a scene. And just generally where they can park their vehicles and where they can stand. And it's good to have them all in one area because it's easier to control, where they're going and whether they're getting in the way or not. And one way to keep them there is to make sure that that's where they can get the most up-to-date information. They don't really, if they can see the action, so to speak, for better or for worse, if they can get a shot of it from with their cameras, then they'll likely stay there. I'm not saying they will. I'm not saying they won't roam, but the two ways of getting them to stay there is the promise of information there and access to what's going on visually. Okay, what you need at the scene is you need the press to be accurate and to be cooperative. Need them to respect the incident perimeter. I'm not saying bark out orders, but make sure they understand why it's important that they respect the incident perimeter. And again, you will most likely have, in many incidents, have help of police or fire. And an important thing that I should mention is don't keep press out of an area that others from the public can go. If you have parents driving on and off campus and you're telling the press they can't go on the school grounds, then that doesn't pass the straight face test. So you can only restrict them as much as you're restricting others. Now, in the school, you certainly have rules and laws regarding showing the faces of minors. So you can lean on that a little bit and make sure that you are doing that. But you can't just keep them away just for the sake of keeping them away. You need the latest information from leadership that you can share, especially if you're saying I'll give you an update every 30 minutes right here on this spot or wherever you're going with it. And so you need to get information from leadership, and you need leadership to know that you're going to need that, even if it's no update. And, leadership and other responders need to trust you and know what you're about and know that you're not going to be releasing information that you shouldn't. So get to know people. All right. I will tell you that I'll get you off this call early because that way you get some free time today. Hopefully you don't fill it with something else. Take a little me time, go through emails and relax, but I know that's not practical for most of us. Okay, media interviews. A lot of this that I refer to will be television, but it also goes for print interviews as well. Anyone want to share a great interaction with the press or one that went completely off the rails and didn't go as expected? Could be a good opportunity to share an experience that could help others. All right, and if you want to, Amy.
I'll share one. Can you hear me okay?
Great. Yes.
So we closed all of our school buildings this year as a result of a threat that was made online. And we were planning on reopening school the next day. And so the chief of police and I did a joint press conference. And we had a reporter in the press conference that was very, very new. It was their first assignment, all of those things. And they had their own emotional reaction to the thought of closing school and then returning students to school. So the questions that this reporter then asked us in the press conference were ones that were more feeling questions than event questions. And so what was really helpful for me in that situation was I always walk into a press conference with like the 5 things I want to make sure that they are aware of. And so I just started to not answer her questions, but make the points that I wanted to have made. And so I found my little cheat sheet in that scenario really helpful, and it moved her off of this line of questioning about extreme situations and feelings. Her questions were fear-based. So I think my points helped change the tone of that press conference.
That is excellent. And so I don't need to say anything more about media interviews. We're all set. Just do what Amy did. But yeah, that's a great way of dealing with that. I generally say three main points. 5 main points is better. But make sure the most important point is right up top, and that's part of educating these reporters, especially when they're new, or any reporter who's getting off track like that and asking questions like that. That's an excellent example. When you talk to the press, and I think this is an easy one to understand, you're not talking to a camera or a reporter, you're talking to the public. And remember that in a crisis, the public has a harder time processing information. So keep it simple. Just like your written products, keep it as simple as you can while still being informative. Don't be too simplistic, but I keep trying to remember what grade level people hear. They can only communicate on like a 5th grade level or something like that during a crisis. But I heard that years ago but it was at a conference at Harvard. So, they're right about everything. When you're talking to the press, thus the public, what makes you a credible source is empathy and caring, expertise, honesty, and your commitment and dedication. Hopefully that's been established already. And in 99% of superintendents, principals, that's established. And same thing for, I heard a statistic once that the most trusted person in most communities is the fire chief. unless there's some local politics or something, or just some personal grudges. I can see that, but that's what makes you credible. So work on that so people hear you and listen to you. Most important information to start with, again, like Amy did, with 5 points or 3 points or whatever the main points are, have that prepared ahead of time. But tell people what's happening, how you're keeping kids safe, the impact of what's happening, and what you're doing, what's being done about it. So you're trying to calm people down. Hopefully it is a nothing burger of an incident, and so you can, just by stating the facts, calm people down and tell them what you're doing. News conferences, use these when you have a lot of media interest. If it may not be practical for you to, and probably not a good idea for you to do 5 separate interviews, because it's taking a lot of your time, or from a practical standpoint, you could say something to one reporter and not mention it to another because it was either new information or it came to mind after, and then you have an angry reporter that they saw something that you said on another channel or in another newspaper or on another website that you didn't tell them. So you're giving everyone the same thing all at once. And the people at the press conference, like Amy's press conference, it was her and the police chief, I believe you said. So the people who are leading the response, don't include too many people, although higher ups might want to take part or even try to lead it. You may have legislators or some other, or some VIP in town who wants to take part, and it might not make sense. So in some situations, if it's not going to help the situation, try to dissuade them. And all politicians are perfectly logical people, and if you tell them that it's not going to work, they're going to say, oh, okay. That, of course, is a lie on my part. I deal with it from time to time, but do your best and try to make sure that the people up front are the ones who have actual information. 3 people is ideal. So when you're preparing for an interview or a press briefing, obviously identify the best spokesperson. That's easy. Develop your messages, your 3, 4, 5 most important points. And include the main point. If there's one overarching theme that's most important, include it at least 3 times. Figure out why you're communicating when developing this and who you're trying to reach. And then it's okay to practice. If you're writing something for someone else, then practice or prep that spokesperson. You can anticipate questions and have that person ask you those questions, or you can just go over it in your head. I had a director who used to like to, I didn't have to ask the director anything when we were preparing. They would just sort of talk out loud and obviously be answering certain questions, and I would give tweaks and just like, well, that's okay, that's not exactly what we're trying to say here. But be ready, and be ready for the press to try to push for things that they can't have or shouldn't have, and don't let them set the ground rules. You can, if you think it's run its course and you need to be somewhere, you can say, thank you, we need to go, follow up with whoever. That way you're not answering emotional questions for an hour. And you can even set ahead of time, this press conference is going to be from 11 to 11:15 or 11 to 11:30. You set the ground rules. It's your turf. Be as accommodating as you can, but don't let them push you around. Again, anticipate questions and answers, especially the difficult ones. Think of the one question you don't want to hear and figure out how you're going to answer it, because you can't just avoid it. You can, if you can honestly push it off, or say you can't That's not something we don't know. I mean, make sure it's honest. There are a few ways of answering that. I have a slide a couple down from here. So prepare for that, and prepare concise 10 to 15 or 15 to 20-second answers to reinforce your most important messages, because for, just that's, you want to make sure that you're not making sure, but you're making it more likely that that's going to get on the news, because reporters are looking for 15 to 20 seconds on television specifically. They're looking for 15 to 20 seconds. They don't want to have to chop up a long answer. If they can find, especially early on, 15 to 20 seconds that outlines what's happening, what you're doing. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you need to do a couple 15 to 20-second answers, but don't go on and go off on a lot of tangents, because if you do that, they're deciding what to put on the air. You're kind of making the decision if you're efficient with your words. So reinforce your messages that way. Look professional, be in control of the interview. If someone's asking emotional questions, steer them back to the main point. If it's an interview, it's okay to ask, or have your communications coordinator ask what the tenor of the interview will be, or you can even ask for questions like what are you looking to get, or what are you going to ask? Just and frame it as, this way we'll be able to provide you with the best answers. We can get all the information you're going to need, and that I'm not saying that's going to work every time, but it will certainly work most of the time. And if they're vague, I don't think I need to tell you if they're vague or evasive about what they're going to ask. It could be anything. They're most likely something that you don't want to be talking about, or some controversy or something like that. And know that in most cases, not the last case that I just mentioned, but in most cases, the reporter wants you to succeed. They just want to get their story. They just want to get a soundbite. It's one of 2 or 3 stories they're doing today. If it's a big event, then it is the one story they're doing, but they still want you to succeed. They still want to be able to get a clear and concise story. Even newspapers and websites, they want efficient quotes. So, and understand that the reporter wants to get the best information. Never lose your cool with a reporter, especially when the camera's rolling. A famous story from Vermont history way back, Channel 3 was interviewing Ralph Wright, who was a longtime Speaker of the House, 70s and 80s, I think, maybe up to the 90s or 80s, 90s. Anyway, someone at Channel 3 had uncovered that he went on a trip on the state dime, and he brought his spouse with him. And apparently it was paid for. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't paid for. There was a good explanation. He hadn't broken the law or anything, but he was hit with the question all of a sudden on camera. He didn't know it was coming. And the reporter's last name was Lewis, and he gets the question. He looks at him and he's like, "What is this shit, Lewis?" And believe it or not, they aired that quote because it was a very compelling bit of theater, so to speak. I don't know if, certainly that's an extreme example, but don't get combative. That will be aired because it's good theater. And respond honestly, work in your key messages 3 times if you can. Keep answers clear and concise, choose your words carefully, and it's okay to pause during an interview, especially right after they ask the question. If you need to think for a second, first of all, if you're just that type of person, I need to think about things for an hour. So it's tough for me to just do it in a few seconds, but tell the reporter, I want to give you the best answer. So after the questions, I may take a few seconds to think of the best way of saying it. Don't think you need to just snap off, get into a rhythm and snap off answers quickly, because that's when some people get in trouble. And if you are making your own statement, you don't generally do that in an interview, but make sure you get your most important facts up front, and don't go in chronological order of the way things happened. Get the most important information first. And as Ralph Wright found out, all microphones, cameras, and pencils are live. You're always on the record when you're talking to a reporter, even in the chit chat after. I always tell people never go off the record, but that's a decision for you to make. I do go off the record with reporters I trust, generally the ones who have been around a long time. If you have a good relationship with someone and it helps you to tell the story, you can go off the record. Well, no, you can never go off the record, but if you choose, if you think you can, if only do it don't do it to like knock someone down or be defensive, but just if providing, the additional context helps, that would be a scenario. If you were to do it, you would do that. Know what you want to say ahead of time. Stick to the main point. Be positive yet realistic. If there's a lost hiker and they're speaking to the person who's leading the search, doesn't want to say, "Oh, we're going to find him. Don't you worry." That person should say something along the lines of, "We have this many people out searching. We've been searching for this many hours. We have this much daylight, so we can do it." Just, reiterate what's being done instead of guessing what the conclusion is going to be. Know when to stop talking. If you finish an answer and the reporter remains silent and keeps the microphone on you, you don't need to keep talking. That silence is their problem. When you're done, you're done. Because if you human nature, you feel like you have to keep talking because they're expecting you to, you could drift off into a direction that you don't want to. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to say that, unless it's something that you should know, that you absolutely should know. But if it's a specific fact about an incident or something that, you know what, I don't have that, offer to get the answer. And then at the end of the interview, you will often have the opportunity, the reporter will say, "Anything else you want to add?" Summarize, get back to your main points, reiterate them, and just make sure that information is out there. Don't speculate or offer opinion. If you get a question about the law enforcement response, even if you know the answer, if you're in an interview and you get that question, refer them to law enforcement, because something could have changed. They definitely want to speak for themselves. You may think you're being helpful to everyone by just giving them this fact that about, but let everyone speak for themselves. Don't ever lose your temper. Don't lie, or say anything you don't want to read in print, hear on the radio, or see on TV or the internet. And never say no comment. If you've heard anyone say no comment, you automatically think they're guilty of the thing they're accused of, or they don't know what they're talking about, or they're just not prepared. And, those are all bad things when you're trying to get people to trust you with the safety of their children. Alternatives, here are a few. And make sure that it actually applies. If something isn't under investigation, don't say that obviously. But these are good alternatives. You have the Privacy Act or HIPAA, and then offer up, get back to your main point or give them something. I believe Sunny is going to send out the presentation, so you can have these on hand. Don't ever use the same one because the press will get suspicious that we coordinated. So sometimes they won't ask you the right questions. Sometimes, like Amy said, they're asking questions that are emotional. You want to get back to the main point. And these are good phrases to get back to it, because what is most important is really perks up reporters' ears. Oh, there's the main point. I'm going to listen to this and probably use the quote or soundbite. Or what we should focus on, or what the public should know is this. The point or goal is this. It's bridging reporters back to where you want to be. You can do that. It may not work every time, but at least it makes an effort to get back to it. And for the most part, it does work. And when you're on camera, especially, pay attention to these different things. If you're doing a one-on-one interview, ask the reporter where they want you to look, whether it's at the reporter or at the camera. If it's a live interview and there's no reporter there, you're going to be looking at the camera. If it's a one-on-one interview, you're going to be looking at the reporter. Sometimes you'll be looking at an inanimate object because the reporter will also be doing the camera, but they want you to look away. That does happen. The expression on your face can really betray a lot of information. If you look shocked at a question, or it could suggest, uh-oh, they know something. Or if you roll your eyes, that's not a polite thing to do. So be conscious of these different things. It's okay. And gestures, it's okay. I don't know if anyone recognizes Peter Coffey here. He was principal at Virgins, and before that he was a soccer coach and PE instructor at CVU forever. But hand gestures are okay. Former boss Glory, yeah, he's still in Bristol. He's still doing woodworking, although he's retired. Small hand gestures to make a point, or if you're referring to something, if you ask the reporter ahead of time, if it helps to point to something like, this, not a lot of it, but ask the reporter, well, can you see this? So if I gesture to it, can you see it? Don't make big hand gestures, because if you're doing this, people are going to say, wow, that person is really, really waving their hands around, and they're not hearing you. They're not hearing your words. They're reading your body language. Often I still get nervous, especially since I went to the other side and I'm not holding the microphone anymore. I'm answering their questions. So it's nerve-wracking before you do an interview, especially if it's your first time or if you haven't done it a lot. The best way to deal with that is just be prepared. Have your main points. Ask the reporter what they're going to ask you. Anticipate the questions, and just do something to relax yourself. Do the Wordle, or just take a walk. Whatever you do that helps you chill out a little bit. And know it's okay to say you don't know the answer to the question for the most part. Not every time. If you should know something, know everything that you need to know. But if it's something that you're not expected to know, offer to get the answer later. And again, they want you to succeed, because they succeed. They get a clear quote or soundbite for the newscast or the newspaper. And so everybody's happy, and it's okay to pause and gather your thoughts. So conclusion, the whole overarching theme here, maintain relationships with responders for that incident where they will be involved in something. And, it's more likely to be a small fire in the wood shop or something like that. Well, small fire in the wood shop if it happens. Anyway, you may have emergency response come because there's an alarm at school, but they will be there. And so get to know the responders and how they're going to communicate. Prepare your messages for a crisis that you're likely to see, or even those that you may not be so likely to see, because those are the big ones, and time is going to be of the essence to get your facts out there. Identify a workspace during a crisis, even if it's off school grounds. Sometimes that's better. If it may get the press away from the scene and clear things up a little bit if they have another place they have to go to get information or interviews or a press conference. Develop plans for a public information function. Assign someone, make sure it's someone who will, don't make it a default, make sure someone has is personable and is able to deal with getting calls from a lot of reporters, and educate parents, the press, staff, the public now about how things are going to work, so they're not guessing while something is happening. Share school safety plans, and you're just let them know how you're going to communicate with them. Maybe establish a Facebook page and just let people know about the Facebook page. You don't even necessarily need to say it's going to be for emergencies. Just let them know that it's out there so they're following it. And so during an incident, if you have one, they are already there. And of course, schoolsafety.vermont.gov. You should make daily trips there because they have so much great information about everything. So are any questions? And I should say, if you need any follow-up to this, or if I skipped something that you were expecting to hear, please. I'm always looking to improve this presentation, and it's evolved over the years. Email me, call me, whatever. If you need someone to take a look at a press release draft, I'm more than happy to help in any way that I can. I've done that for school districts. If you have staff who would like to learn more about talking to the press or doing interviews, I have a short presentation on that. Maybe we can schedule a half hour for everyone, but if you really have a need for something for staff, I'll do a small one for your staff for this or any other. But I see Katie O'Connor. Do you have a question?
I do. I just had a quick question. When you were talking about identifying roles for people, obviously you want, a spokesperson. You talked about someone who can kind of monitor social media. Do you have recommendations for other roles, maybe within a supervisory office, or, other roles that should be identified for a crisis?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I have for my response, because for emergency responses, because I'm sure you're trying to communicate to the same people. I have a deputy who who's a good writer, who can write products. The communications coordinator may be on the phone with a lot of reporters trying to work things out. So having a second person, if you can, particularly someone who is a good writer, who can write well. Social media, as you mentioned, someone who is good at making graphics, because you may be posting to Instagram to reach kids, or you may post those graphics get a lot of attention on social media. I have someone who's specifically for the media. I have someone who can put together press conferences. So, I don't always have, it's sort of, I start with me doing all of that because the incident is just small enough where I can do all of it. Then I add a deputy, and then a writer or social media person. That can often be the same person. But just adding on and figuring out what your needs are and who can do that. Those are really important positions to have. All right, and I'll throw it back to Sunny to wrap things up.
Thanks so much, Mark. Great presentation today. A lot of really good information. As always, I can't recommend Mark enough. If you guys are, looking for some public information assistance, he's a really great resource. His information is up on the screen. If you have school safety concerns or looking for additional trainings or exercise assistance, please reach out to myself or Rob. I put both of our contact information earlier up in the chat, so you should be able to access that. It's also available on our website for the School Safety Center. And as Mark had said, there's a lot of really great information up on the center's website. There's, templates that you can utilize. There's exercises you can go through with your crisis planning groups. And you can always reach out to myself or Rob with any questions. So thanks for taking the time to attend this training. We hope to be able to offer more of these in the future. So if you see those out there, please recommend your colleagues to attend them as well. And thanks again, Mark. This is really great. I hope you all have a great day.